Hi everyone, it's another story from my journal really today about what happened, hopefully to give a little bit of context to the relationship and also to explore some of the challenges that I came up against in those first few days after leaving. So Mr. C and I were in business together. We had been in business separately when we first got together. I ran a restaurant business which me and my ex-husband had started. He had always wanted to run a pub or a restaurant, and I'd always really enjoyed working in hospitality. So after we got married, I did everything I could to make that dream a reality. I knew he liked to drink, but I was pretty naive to the fact that he had a problem at that time. And being in a pub just meant he had beer on tap and good company with which to drink. And everything else was left down to me. And despite being exhausted all of the time, I thought that is what running a business was meant to be like. And I enjoyed the variety and the challenge that each day brought. The first restaurant we had was a couple of hours away from our hometown, and after my daughter was born, the reality of being far away and living with an abusive addict was really starting to become apparent to me. And in a bid to take my first steps towards freedom, we moved to a pub which was a lot more local to my parents. Now, this restaurant had a dreadful reputation. It had zero customers, and so when we got there, I spent an awful lot of time and energy on turning it around, which happened very quickly, and so I was always very busy. It was all operated under a franchise, so whilst it was my own business, they were my own staff, and it was my own menu, I was still subject to performance reviews from the area management team, which really kept me focused and efficient in running my business. I'm proud of everything that I achieved in those restaurants. I started my first business when I was 22 and I experienced great success and I learned a ton. And I did most of it whilst I was either pregnant or with a baby and then a toddler, and always supporting an alcoholic husband who did very little to help build the businesses he'd wanted to create in the first place. I was so busy, but I lived to serve, and I really did enjoy interacting with new faces and new challenges and new characters every day. I was so busy, but interacting with the new faces and the new challenges and characters every day really did light me up. Mr. C was a customer at the pub, and when he got wind that my marriage was on the rocks, he subtly started to prey on me. I couldn't see it at the time, but when I look back, his tactics were very obvious and so manipulative. My husband had been reluctant to leave the pub, and so for a fair few months we didn't speak and he lived in the spare room. So when he moved out to his parents' house, Mr. C really upped his game. I'd made it quite clear that I wasn't ready for another relationship, but the love bombing came in pretty hard. Love bombing is a tactic that abusers use to get you hooked on their personal brand of love. They say and do all of the right things, and it feels like you're living in a movie. There are streams of compliments, there are free-flowing conversations, there are laughs, there are gifts, there are shared dreams and aspirations and goals. And you're transported to cloud nine, and you're kept there long enough to fall in love with them and to allow yourself to believe that this is the real deal. I was taken to cloud nine, and after everything I've been through with my husband, I quite liked it there, and I stayed there for a while. And whilst I was there, it was decided that I would move out of the pub and we would rent a property together. All for logical and rational reasons at the time, but the sadness that I felt about leaving my home was definitely my intuition trying to tell me it wasn't the right thing to do. And then, after a few months, I was convinced to give up the business altogether, enter into business with him, and transform his one man band painting and decorating outfit into a specialised business that transformed kitchens and furniture. It really is only on reflection that I'm able to see how manipulative and sneaky some of the strategies to persuade me were that he used. Following our intuition always sounds so easy when we're looking back, but actually knowing how our own personal intuition shows up for us and trusting it is a vital part of the healing journey. Like for me, my intuition runs down the backs of my legs. So if I can feel that, I know that there's something I need to sit up and take note of. But that's taken me right until the past 12 months to learn that that is where I feel it in my body. Forgiving myself for handing over the autonomy I had over my life in these moments that were dressed up as concern, support, or building a shared dream together has been a really big part of my healing journey. I'm a perfectionist, and admitting that I've fucked up can be pretty hard at times, but I really hold the belief that life happens for us, not to us, and that it's okay to make mistakes because you only know what you know at the time. And so I left my business and our business was born, and I got to do all of the things that I loved about business: the website and the branding, the spreadsheets, the customer service, the problem solving, the brainstorming. I got to create the business systems that I really enjoyed doing, and he did the actual transformations and the heavy lifting, as it were. Now, the story of our business and where it took us and how my role inside the partnership changed is a story on its own, and one I shall share in more detail another day. But suffices to say, on the day that I left, we were still in business together and we had obligations and we had customers. Having been together and in business together for over 3 years, I was now able to do everything that he was, and I was expected to, along with everything else that I did to run the business. And so, 3 days after I had left my abusive, controlling, and cruel boyfriend, I had to go to work with him and fit 23 doors, oil a worktop, fit the handles, and leave. I knew that if I didn't go, he would play the victim even more, and he had very little integrity, and I'm a serial people pleaser and used to putting a brave face on it. And so I felt like I had no choice. If I just went, got my head down, did the work, sent the invoice, got paid, that would be the last time I'd ever have to work with him. And so that's what we did. He picked me up from my parents' house and we drove the 25 minutes to the customers. I'd requested that we didn't talk about it the day before, and he'd promised that he wouldn't bring it up. Not that his promises really meant a lot, and my poor mum was so worried. I should have just left it, let him clear up the mess with the customer and stood my ground. But I wasn't really thinking straight, and I want everyone to know that I totally get it. We get so used to trying to keep the peace while simultaneously growing used to the abuse, and so we're able to endure things that from the outside look downright ridiculous. So we get to the house and I get my head down and we install the doors, and he's overly nice and he's trying to have a laugh, and at one point he tries to hug me and I froze, and I could feel the disapproval and I could feel him starting to turn, and so I hugged him back and I smiled and we carried on. Response. Lots of people talk about the fight or the flight response to moments of danger, but not so many people talk about the freeze or fawn responses. I'm going to talk about those as we move through the series, because These are the ones that we turn to when we don't feel that we have an option to leave. Eventually, all the doors were fitted and the van was loaded, and I found a screw just as we were tidying up and I put it into my back pocket, and we headed back to my parents' house, and he suggested that I went over on the Friday to collect some of my belongings after I'd taken my daughter to school. So I agreed. I was so relieved and proud of myself that I'd been able to keep this fucked up version of peace that days like that had come to be. I went upstairs and I took the screw out of my pocket and I put it on my bedside table, and I felt confident that if I could handle that day, then I could handle Friday. Thank you for watching this instalment of the 1 Year On series. If you want to join in on any discussions around some of the topics or themes that we've covered in today's instalment, then head over to the Facebook group if you're not already in there. And we're going to be discussing the fight, flight, freeze, fawn responses in the group. So join us there. See you soon.